My husband of 7 years forced me to split every household bill because he said I was just a gold-digging wife. The fork stopped halfway to my mouth when he cleared his throat in that particular way. You know the sound, the little throat clear people use right before they drop a bomb in the middle of dinner and pretend it is just casual conversation. So he said, without looking up from the perfectly seasoned chicken I had spent an hour preparing. I've been thinking. I set my fork down carefully. 7 years of marriage had taught me how to read the warning signs, the way he adjusted his collar, the slight pause before he spoke. The laptop he had positioned just within reach on the kitchen counter, like he had brought evidence to a trial I did not know I was attending. "What kind of thinking?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He finally looked at me, and I saw something in his face that I had never seen before. Not frustration, not exhaustion, not even resentment. Cold calculation. Well, he said I've been doing some math. And frankly, this arrangement isn't fair to me anymore. What arrangement? This whole setup where I work my ass off every day while he gestured vaguely around our immaculate kitchen, as if the clean counters, warm dinner, folded dish towels, fresh groceries, paid bills, and peaceful house had all appeared by magic. Do whatever this is, the words hit me like ice water. I had left my marketing job 7 years earlier, right after we got married. His idea, actually. Back then, he had held both of my hands and told me a real man should provide for his wife. "I want to take care of you," he had said. "I don't want you exhausted by some office job when we can build a real home together." I had been hesitant. I loved my career. I loved the challenge, the strategy, the feeling of walking into a meeting and knowing my ideas mattered. But he had been so insistent, so romantic about it, so sure that I deserved to be protected from stress. And now he was looking at me like I was some kind of parasite. "I've created a spreadsheet," he continued. Then he flipped open the laptop with the enthusiasm of a man presenting a brilliant business proposal. The screen glowed between us, turning our marriage into rows, columns, and totals. "I calculated all our monthly expenses," he said. "Mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, everything. From now on, we're splitting it 50-50. There it was, our life reduced to numbers. Mortgage, $2,947. Utilities, $340. Groceries, $580. Insurance, $420. The list went on and on. Each item meticulously calculated, each line somehow colder than the one before it. "But I don't have a job," I said quietly. "You asked me to quit, remember?" He waved his hand dismissively, like that was an old receipt he no longer cared to honor. "That was then. This is now. You're a smart woman. You can figure something out. I'm not running a charity here." I stared at him. This man I had loved. This man whose socks I washed, whose meals I cooked, whose mother I tolerated, whose appointments I remembered, whose entire daily life I quietly managed without ever sending him an invoice. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside me. Something cold, something sharp, something almost calm. "So let me understand this," I said, hearing a tone in my own voice that I barely recognized. "You want me to pay half of everything?" "Yes." "Starting when exactly?" "Starting next month." He smiled, clearly pleased with himself. "I knew you'd be reasonable about this. You've always been so practical." I looked at the spreadsheet again, memorizing every detail. The mortgage on the house I had turned into a home. The utility bills for the electricity I used to iron his shirts. The grocery money for the meals I planned shop for, cooked, served, and cleaned up afterward. Then I said, "Okay." He blinked. "Okay." "Yes," I said, "you're absolutely right. If we're going to be roommates instead of husband and wife, then we should split everything equally." I smiled. Something in my expression must have registered because he shifted slightly in his chair. "That's great, honey," he said. "I'm glad you understand." But I could see it in his eyes. He had expected a fight, maybe tears, definitely begging. He had expected me to panic and promise to do better, though I was still not sure what better was supposed to mean when I had already given him 7 years of my labor for free. Instead, he got agreement, and my agreement unsettled him more than resistance would have. I picked up my fork and took another bite of the dinner I had prepared. "This is delicious, isn't it?" I said lightly. "I really outdid myself tonight." "Yeah," he muttered suddenly, very interested in his plate. "It's good." As I chewed, my mind was already working. If he wanted to play this game, I would play it. But he had just made one crucial mistake. He assumed I was still the same woman who had agreed to quit her job 7 years ago. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. The next morning, I woke up at my usual time, 6:30. Normally, I would have padded to the kitchen, started the coffee, laid out his clothes, packed his lunch, checked the weather, and made sure his morning moved smoothly enough that he could leave the house thinking he was naturally organized. Instead, I rolled over and went back to sleep. At 7:15, I heard his alarm go off. Then again at 7:25. By 7:30, I heard him stumbling around the bedroom, clearly confused by the absence of his usual routine. "Honey." His voice drifted from the kitchen. "Where's the coffee?" I pulled my pillow over my head and smiled. Let the games begin. 20 minutes later, he was back in the bedroom, half-dressed and agitated. "What's going on?" he demanded. "There's no coffee, no breakfast, and I can't find my blue shirt anywhere." I stretched lazily and looked at him with innocent confusion. "Good morning to you too." "What's wrong? What's wrong?" "It's almost 8 and nothing's ready." "Ready for what?" I sat up, genuinely puzzled by his distress. "Oh, you mean your stuff. But sweetheart, remember what you said last night? We're splitting everything 50-50 now. That means we each handle our own responsibilities." His mouth opened and closed like a fish. "But you always make coffee." "I make coffee for myself," I said. "You're welcome to make your own." I swung my legs out of bed and headed for my closet. "Your blue shirt is in the laundry room, by the way. In the dirty clothes basket where you left it 3 days ago." "But you always do the laundry." "I do my laundry. Your clothes are your responsibility now." I pulled out a beautiful dress I had not worn in months. It was one of those dresses I used to save for special occasions that never seemed to come. "This arrangement was your idea, remember? Equal partners, equal responsibilities." I could practically see the gears grinding in his head as he tried to process this new reality. He had wanted a business arrangement, and I was giving him exactly that. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, stomping toward the laundry room. "You're being petty." "I'm being practical," I called after him, "just like you said I was." While he crashed around looking for clean clothes, I made myself 1 cup of coffee in my favorite mug, the one he usually grabbed because it was bigger. I scrambled 1 egg, toasted 1 slice of bread, and sat down to eat in peaceful silence. He reappeared 20 minutes later in a wrinkled shirt that did not match his pants. His hair was still messy because he could not find the hair product I usually set out for him. "You look nice," I said pleasantly. Very authentic. He grabbed his keys with unnecessary force. "This is insane. I'm going to be late for work." "Traffic is pretty bad around this time," I agreed. "You might want to leave a few minutes earlier tomorrow. Oh, and don't forget to pick up milk on your way home. We're out." "Pick up milk." He stared at me. "That's your job." I looked at him with genuine surprise. "My job? I thought I didn't have a job. Remember? Besides, you drink milk too. If you want it in the house, you'll need to contribute to making that happen." The look on his face was priceless. It was the look of a man finally beginning to understand what 50-50 actually meant. After he left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows, I sat back down with my coffee and pulled out my phone. It was time to do some research. I started with my old LinkedIn profile. It had been dormant for 7 years, but it was still there. Then I opened a new document and began making lists. My skills, my contacts, My options. At the bottom of the page, I wrote one simple line. Day 1 of independence. The house felt different without the weight of his expectations pressing down on every room. Lighter somehow. For the first time in years, I was not rushing to finish his to-do list before he got home. I was making my own. 2 weeks into our new business arrangement, I discovered just how expensive 50-50 could be for him. I was folding my laundry when I noticed that my favorite white blouse had turned a lovely shade of pink. Not the romantic blush pink someone might choose deliberately, the tragic pink that happens when someone throws a red sock into a white load. I found him in the living room, sprawled on the couch watching sports highlights. "We have a problem," I announced, holding up the ruined blouse. He barely glanced away from the TV. "What now?" "You damaged my property. This blouse cost $95 and now it's unwearable." "It's just a shirt," he said with a shrug. "Throw it out." "I will, right after you reimburse me for it." That got his attention. "Reimburse you for what?" "Property damage. You put your red gym shirt in with my whites despite the clear laundry basket separation system I established. Your negligence, your responsibility." I pulled out my phone and showed him a screenshot of the blouse from the store's website. $95. This is insane. We're married. We're business partners now, remember? And business partners compensate each other for damages. I sat down across from him with my most reasonable expression. "Unless you're suggesting we go back to the old arrangement where we share everything." The trapped look on his face told me everything I needed to know. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll pay for your stupid shirt." "Thank you. I'll take cash." Over the next few days, I implemented a comprehensive damage assessment system. When he left coffee rings on the dining room table I had spent hours refinishing, I charged him a $15 wood restoration fee. When he used my expensive shampoo because he had forgotten to buy his own, I charged a $12 replacement cost. When he ate the last of the Greek yogurt I had specifically bought for my breakfast, I charged $7.38 plus an inconvenience fee for the extra trip to the store. I kept meticulous records in a little notebook I labeled Partnership Expenses. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I had left early from the part-time consulting job I had finally landed and came home to grab some files I had forgotten. As I approached the front door, I heard him talking on the phone inside. "I know it's been tough, babe, but I'm working on it," he said. "The whole splitting expenses thing is going better than I expected." "No, she's not suspicious at all. She actually agreed to it right away." "Yeah, I should be able to send you more money starting next month." I stood frozen on my own doorstep, my key halfway to the lock. "I know you're struggling since the divorce," he continued, "and I promised I'd take care of you. Look, once I get her to start paying half of everything, I'll have way more money to help with your rent and the kids' stuff." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. This was not about fairness. This was not about equal partnership. This was about funding his ex-girlfriend's life while keeping his wife as unpaid household labor. "She's been playing housewife for 7 years, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "It's about time she contributed something real. Besides, what's she going to do? Leave? She hasn't worked in years. She needs me more than I need her." I backed away from the door, my hands shaking with rage. Not just anger, pure crystalline fury mixed with humiliation so sharp it almost made me dizzy. How long had he been planning this? How long had he been talking about me like I was some pathetic dependent while secretly funneling money to another woman? I got back in my car and drove around the block 3 times before I trusted myself to walk through that door without doing something irreversible. When I finally entered, he was off the phone and acting like nothing had happened. "You're home early," he said casually. "Forgot some paperwork." My voice sounded normal, which surprised me. Then I added, "Hey, I've been thinking about our partnership arrangement." He looked up wearily. "Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. If we're going to be true business partners, we need to do this properly." I smiled. Something in my expression made him lean back slightly. "I mean really properly. Full accountability, complete transparency, the works. What do you mean? Well, for starters, I think we should put our partnership agreement in writing. Spell out exactly what each partner is responsible for, what the financial obligations are, maybe even include some performance metrics. The color drained from his face. That seems a little extreme. Extreme for business partners. I tilted my head, studying him like he was a fascinating specimen. I thought you'd appreciate the professional approach. After all, if we're going to be partners, we should treat it like any other business relationship, don't you think? He mumbled something about thinking it over and retreated to his office. I went into the kitchen, opened my notebook to a fresh page, and wrote a new heading at the top: Partnership Dissolution Planning. The doorbell rang at 8:30 on Saturday morning, which could only mean one thing. His mother had arrived unannounced, as was her cherished tradition. I answered the door in my pajamas and robe, coffee mug in hand, completely unbothered by my appearance. The old me would have panicked, thrown on real clothes, and spent 10 minutes apologizing for the state of the house. "Oh," she said, taking in my casual clothes with obvious disapproval. "You're not dressed." "Good morning to you too. Come in." I stepped aside, genuinely curious to see her reaction to the current state of our home. She walked into the living room and stalked dead. His side of the room was a disaster zone. Dirty clothes draped over furniture, takeout containers stacked on the coffee table, newspapers scattered across the floor. My side was immaculate, with fresh flowers and neatly arranged books. "What in heaven's name happened here?" she gasped. "Oh, that's your son's area," I said. "I only manage my own space now." I settled into my clean chair and sipped my coffee peacefully. "Where is he?" "Still sleeping." He was up late, trying to figure out how to work the washing machine. Her face turned an interesting shade of purple. "You didn't help him." "Why would I?" "He's a grown man." I steadied her over my mug. "Would you like some coffee? I have enough for one more cup." "This is outrageous." She marched toward the kitchen, and I heard her sharp intake of breath when she discovered the division there, too. One side was spotless. The other looked like a tornado had hit it. She stormed back into the living room, her perfectly coiffed hair practically vibrating with indignation. "What kind of wife are you?" "This house is a disaster. Actually, half the house is a disaster. My half is quite nice." I gestured around my pristine living space. "The disaster half belongs to your son." "Don't be ridiculous. A wife's job is to maintain the home." I set down my coffee and looked at her with genuine curiosity. "According to whom?" "According to common decency. According to the way things are supposed to be." I stood up and walked to the kitchen. When I returned, I was holding a folder I had prepared for exactly this moment. "You might want to see this before you continue." I handed her a printed copy of his spreadsheet, the one where he had calculated every household expense and declared that I needed to pay half because I was, in his words, freeloading. She stared at the document, her mouth opening and closing silently. "Your son decided we should be business partners instead of husband and wife," I explained pleasantly. "Equal financial responsibilities, equal domestic responsibilities." This was entirely his idea. But you're supposed to..." "Supposed to what?" "Pay half the bills and do all the housework." I laughed, and the sound felt lighter than I had felt in months. "That's not a partnership. That's a scam." She looked around again as if she was seeing the situation with new eyes. "He didn't mean..." "Oh, he meant it. He spent considerable time creating that spreadsheet. He was very proud of his mathematical skills." I took the document back from her trembling hands. "Would you like me to show you the part where he calculated that my 7 years of unpaid household management was worth $0? The fight went out of her all at once. She sank onto his dirty couch, apparently not caring about the takeout containers. "I raised him better than this," she whispered. "Did you?" I asked, not unkindly. "Because this level of entitlement doesn't develop overnight." Heavy footsteps on the stairs announced his arrival. He appeared in rumpled pajamas, his hair sticking up at odd angles, clearly unprepared for his mother's visit. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I came to see why your wife wasn't taking care of you properly," she said flatly. Instead, I find out you've turned your marriage into some kind of business arrangement. He shot me a look that could have melted steel. She's been filling your head with nonsense. Nonsense. His mother held up the spreadsheet. You documented it yourself. The silence stretched uncomfortably. I watched him realize that he could not deny what was written in his own hand. He could not dismiss his mother's concern the way he had been dismissing mine. Look, he finally said, it's complicated. You don't understand the whole situation. Then explain it, his mother demanded. He looked between us, clearly calculating his options. I just think we should both contribute equally. What's wrong with that? Nothing, I said cheerfully, which is why I've been contributing exactly equally. I pay my half of everything and take care of my half of everything. His half is his responsibility. His mother looked around the room again, really looked, and I could see her finally understanding the full picture. I think she said, slowly, I should go. That's probably best, I agreed. This is between business partners now, not family. She stood, brushed off her skirt, and walked to the door without another word. Before leaving, she turned back to her son. You made this bed, she said quietly. Now you get to lie in it. After she left, he turned on me with a fury I had never seen before. How dare you embarrass me like that in front of my mother? I looked at him calmly. I didn't embarrass you. You embarrassed yourself. I just refused to clean it up. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was updating my resume for the third time in 2 weeks. I had been applying for entry-level positions, assuming my 7-year gap had made me unemployable in any meaningful way. Then my phone rang. Is this really the marketing genius who used to run circles around all of us in Professor Martinez's strategy class? The voice was familiar. Warm, and filled with the kind of confidence I had forgotten I used to possess. This is she, I said cautiously. It's Jake from college. We worked on that impossible campaign project together junior year. The one where we had to rebrand that failing restaurant chain. The memory hit me like a wave. Late nights in the library, whiteboards covered with brand positioning diagrams. The thrill of solving impossible problems with nothing but creativity and determination. I had loved that version of myself. Jake, I said, how did you get this number? I have my ways. Actually, I've been trying to track you down for months. I'm heading up marketing for a consulting firm now, and I've got a problem that has your name written all over it. I haven't worked in 7 years. I said automatically. It had become the disclaimer I gave every potential employer almost before they asked. So you haven't had a lobotomy. Your brain is still in there, right? I laughed despite myself. Last I checked. Good enough for me. We've got a client who is hemorrhaging customers, and 3 different agencies have failed to figure out why. I need someone who can think differently, someone who can see patterns other people miss. Sound familiar? It did. It sounded exactly like the person I used to be. Jake, I appreciate the thought, but I'm not exactly interview ready. I'd need time to prepare, brush up on current trends, all of that. Skip the interview. I've already seen your work. Remember that portfolio from senior year I kept a copy? I still reference it sometimes. His voice turned serious. Look, I know you disappeared after college, got married, did the domestic thing. But talent doesn't expire. If anything, life experience probably made you sharper. The conversation lasted 45 minutes. By the end of it, I had a consulting contract that paid more per month than my husband made in 2. There's one condition, Jake said as we wrapped up. I'm going to need you to travel occasionally. Client meetings, strategy sessions. Is that going to be a problem? I looked around my half of the immaculate house. Then I looked at the disaster zone that was his half. Not at all. The first client meeting was a revelation. I walked into a conference room full of expensive suits and felt something click back into place. A part of myself I had packed away so long ago that I had almost forgotten it existed. The client slid a folder across the table. 3 agencies have told us we need to completely rebrand and change our entire business model, he said. What do you think? I spent 20 minutes reviewing their materials. Then I looked up. I think those agencies were trying to justify their fees instead of solving your problem. The room went quiet. I continued, "Your brand isn't the problem. Your customer service is. Specifically, your phone system routes people through 7 different departments before they reach someone who can actually help them. Your customers aren't leaving because they don't like your product. They're leaving because buying from you is exhausting." I spent the next hour walking them through a complete customer journey analysis that I improvised on the spot. By the time I finished, the CEO was taking notes. "This is exactly what we needed," he said. "When can you start?" Jake walked me out afterward, grinning like he had won the lottery. "That was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I'd forgotten how good you were at cutting through the noise." "I'd forgotten too," I admitted. He stopped walking and looked at me. "Seriously, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you stop?" "You were the most ambitious person in our graduating class. I always figured you'd end up running your own agency by now." The question hit harder than I expected. "I got married," I said. "Your husband wanted you to focus on the home." I opened my mouth to give the automatic response I had been giving for 7 years, that it had been my choice, that I had wanted to be a supportive wife, that I had been happy to step away. But standing there in my professional clothes, fresh from solving a problem that had stumped 3 established agencies, I could not make the words come. "I don't think what I wanted mattered much," I said finally. Jake's expression darkened. "That's not okay." "No," I agreed, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "It's not." He walked me to my car, and as I drove home, I felt like I was seeing everything with new eyes. The strip malls and office buildings I passed were not just scenery anymore. They were possibilities, opportunities, places where my skills mattered, places where my ideas had value. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat for a moment before going inside. The house looked different somehow, smaller. Less like a castle and more like what it actually was, just a building. Inside, I found him at the kitchen table with his laptop, surrounded by bills and that infamous spreadsheet. "How was your day?" he asked without looking up. "Productive." I set my purse down and loosened my blazer. "I got a consulting contract. Good money." Now he looked up. "That's great. How much money?" I named the figure. His eyes widened. "That's more than I make." "I know." I smiled. "Looks like I won't have any trouble paying my half of the bills after all." The expression on his face was complicated. Surprise! Worry. And something else I could not quite identify at first. Something that looked almost like fear. For the first time in 7 years, I understood why. She showed up on a Saturday afternoon while he was at his brother's house, probably complaining about his unreasonable wife, who dared to expect equal treatment in her own home. The doorbell rang, and I opened it to find a woman about my age with tired eyes and highlighted hair that needed touching up. She was pretty in a worn-down way, like someone who had been fighting battles for too long. "You must be his wife," she said, as if that explained everything. "I am," I replied. "And you must be the ex-girlfriend he's been financially supporting." I leaned against the doorframe casually. "Would you like to come in?" Her confident expression faltered. What?" "Come in," I repeated, stepping aside. "We should talk." She followed me into the living room, clearly thrown by my calm demeanor. I could practically see her recalibrating, trying to figure out why I was not screaming or throwing things. "Look," she started perching nervously on the edge of the couch. "I know this is awkward, but I'm worried about him. He's been so stressed lately, and I think you don't understand how hard he works." "Oh, I understand perfectly." I settled into my chair with the cup of tea I had been drinking when she arrived. "He works very hard to maintain 2 households on 1 salary." The color drained from her face. "I'm sorry. He's been sending you money, hasn't he? That's why he suddenly decided we needed to split all our expenses 50-50. More money for him means more money for you." She started to deny it, but I held up my hand. "Before you waste energy on lies, you should know I've seen the evidence." I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder I had prepared weeks earlier. Bank statements with highlighted transfers, screenshots of message records I had pieced together from the phone bill, Credit card charges to a florist in her neighborhood. February 14th, I said, pointing to one charge. Roses delivered to your address. March 23rd, money transfer for $400 with the memo, rent help. April 15th, another transfer for $600 with the memo, kids need shoes. She stared at the papers like they might catch fire. How did you get these? I'm not stupid, despite what both of you apparently think. I sat back down, watching her face cycle through shock, embarrassment, and something that might have been admiration. He said you didn't know, she whispered. He said a lot of things. That I was lazy, that I contributed nothing, that I was lucky he kept me around. I sipped my tea calmly. Did he mention that I've been running his household for 7 years without pay, while he convinced me I was worthless? Her mouth opened and closed silently. Here's what's interesting, I continued conversationally. You're not the villain here. You're just another woman he's manipulating. He told you I was some kind of gold digger, didn't he? Made you think you were saving him from a terrible marriage. She nodded reluctantly, just like he made me think I was lucky to have a man who wanted to take care of me. Just like he probably told his first ex-wife that she was the problem too. First ex-wife. Her voice was barely audible. Oh yes. Did he not mention her? Interesting. I leaned forward slightly. Let me guess. He told you that you were different from all the other women who didn't understand him. The recognition in her eyes was painful to watch. He has a pattern, I said gently. Find a woman who needs something. Security, financial help, validation. Promise to provide it. Then slowly make her believe she's the problem when things go wrong. But he loves me, she said, though her voice lacked conviction. Does he, or does he, love having someone who depends on him? I pulled out one more document, a printout of his call logs. Look at this. Every time he calls you is when he's angry with me. You're not his girlfriend. You're his emotional escape valve. She studied the evidence, and I could see the exact moment everything clicked into place. Oh God, she breathed. I'm such an idiot. No, you're not. You're a single mother trying to survive, and he offered you a lifeline. That doesn't make you stupid. It makes you human. We sat in silence for a moment, two women who had been played by the same man in different ways. What are you going to do? She asked finally. I'm going to stop paying for his games, both literally and figuratively. I gathered up the papers. What are you going to do? She looked around my beautiful home, the home I had created and maintained while believing I was worthless, and something hardened in her expression. I'm going to stop taking his money, she said firmly. I've been applying for better jobs anyway. I don't need his charity. Good for you. She stood, then paused at the door. Aren't you angry at me? I considered the question seriously. A month ago, I would have been furious. I would have blamed you for everything. I probably would have fought to win him back. I smiled, and it felt genuine. Now I just feel sorry for whoever he targets next. After she left, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my perfectly organized living space. For the first time in months, I felt completely at peace. I had spent 7 years believing I needed to fight for scraps of affection from a man who was giving the best parts of himself to someone else. Now I understood the truth. There were no best parts. There was only manipulation skillfully applied to whoever was most vulnerable. The most empowering part was not exposing him. It was realizing I did not want to win him back. I wanted something so much better. The legal papers arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a courier who looked apologetic about the whole thing. I signed for them with the same calm I had been cultivating for months, then sat at my kitchen table to read what my husband thought was his nuclear option. Petition for exclusive use and occupancy of marital residence. That was the header. Below it, in legal language that could not quite hide the desperation, he was asking a judge to remove me from my own home because I was allegedly creating an uninhabitable living situation and preventing him from peaceful enjoyment of his property. I had to laugh. After 7 years of free housekeeping, cooking, scheduling emotional emotional labor and invisible management, he was now claiming I was the problem because I had stopped providing those services for free. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday. I spent the weekend preparing. By Monday night, I had 3 binders full of evidence that told a very different story than the one he was trying to sell. Tuesday morning, I dressed in my best suit, the one I had bought for client meetings, and arrived at the courthouse early. He was already there with his lawyer, an expensive-looking man in his 50s who clearly thought this was going to be a straightforward case of removing an uncooperative wife. When the judge called our case, I stood with my own representation, a sharp family law attorney who had taken one look at my evidence and agreed to work with me immediately. "Your Honor," his lawyer began, "my client is simply asking for the right to live peacefully in his own home. His wife has created an impossible situation, refusing to maintain the household and creating deliberate chaos." The judge, a woman in her 60s with intelligent eyes, looked at me. "How do you respond to these allegations?" My lawyer stood. "Your Honor, we have extensive documentation that tells the complete story." He glanced at me, and I nodded. "My client has maintained detailed records of the marital arrangement her husband demanded. We presented everything chronologically. The original spreadsheet where he calculated that my 7 years of household management was worth nothing. Bank records showing money transfers to his ex-girlfriend. The written log I had kept of every time he expected me to clean up after him, while simultaneously demanding that I pay half of everything. Furthermore, my lawyer continued, my client has been gainfully employed for the past 2 months and is fully capable of meeting her financial obligations. The issue is not her inability to contribute. It is her husband's expectation that she should pay equally while continuing to provide all domestic labor for free. The judge studied the documents for what felt like an eternity. When she finally looked up, her expression was not sympathetic to his cause. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said to his lawyer. "Your client decided unilaterally that his wife should pay 50% of all household expenses, despite having been out of the workforce for 7 years, at his request?" "Well, Your Honor, circumstances change." "Indeed they do." The judge's voice was dry. "And it appears circumstances have changed in ways your client did not anticipate." She turned to him directly. "Sir, did you create this spreadsheet?" He shifted uncomfortably. "Yes, but, and did you present it to your wife as a non-negotiable change to your marital arrangement?" "I thought we should both contribute equally." "I see. And in your definition of equal contribution, your wife would pay half of all expenses and continue to provide all domestic services." The silence stretched uncomfortably. "Your Honor," his lawyer interjected, "my client simply wants to live in his own home without harassment." Harassment. The judge looked at my documentation again. "I see here that your client's wife has been paying her agreed-upon 50% of all expenses, while maintaining only her own living spaces and belongings. How exactly is adhering to his own proposed arrangement considered harassment?" I watched his lawyer realize they were losing badly. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I see evidence that your client has been financially supporting another woman throughout this marriage, including during the period when he was demanding that his wife contribute more financially." The courtroom fell silent, except for the sound of his lawyer desperately shuffling papers. "Petition denied," the judge said firmly. "Not only is there no basis for removing his wife from her marital home, but the evidence suggests that she has been remarkably accommodating to an arrangement that was heavily biased against her interests." As we walked out of the courthouse, his lawyer was already talking about appeal options, but I could see in my husband's eyes that he knew it was over. "You cannot win a case when all the evidence proves you are exactly as unreasonable as your opponent claims." Outside, he caught up with me in the parking lot. "This isn't over," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. "Yes, it is." I looked at him calmly. "You wanted to play hardball, remember? You thought you could scare me into going back to being your unpaid servant. Instead, you just proved to a judge exactly what kind of man you are." "I never meant for it to go this far." "Of course you didn't. You meant to get your way without consequences like always. I opened my car door, but actions have consequences now. Maybe it's time you learned that. As I drove home, I felt something I had not experienced in years. The solid satisfaction of being completely legally, unquestionably right. For the first time since the whole mess started, I was not just surviving his games, I was winning them. He left the day after the court hearing, claiming he needed space to think after his humiliating legal defeat. I watched him pack a suitcase with the same detachment I might feel watching a stranger load a car. "I'll be staying at my brother's for a while," he announced, as if this was some great sacrifice he was making for our relationship. "Okay," I said, not looking up from my laptop where I was reviewing client proposals. "Okay, that's all you have to say. What would you like me to say?" I glanced at him briefly. "You're an adult. You can stay wherever you want." The look on his face suggested he had expected tears, begging promises to change. Instead, he got the same mild interest I might show a weather report. After he left, I walked through the house slowly, really seeing it for the first time in months. Without his constant mess, his complaints, and his heavy presence sucking the energy out of every room, the space felt transformed. Lighter, like it could breathe again. I made dinner just for myself, exactly what I wanted, and ate it while watching a documentary he would have hated. Then I took a long bath with expensive bath salts, read until midnight, and slept diagonally across the entire bed. I woke up the next morning feeling more rested than I had in years. Work became my sanctuary. The consulting firm Jake ran had a collaborative, energetic atmosphere that reminded me why I had loved marketing in the first place. Ideas mattered there. Solutions were celebrated. Nobody questioned my competence or made me feel like I should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute. "You've been different lately," Jake mentioned over coffee after a particularly successful client presentation. "More confident, more yourself." "I guess I feel more like myself," I admitted. "It's amazing how much mental energy gets freed up when you're not constantly defending your right to exist." "Is that what it was like at home?" I considered the question. Jake and I had started having these conversations more often. Honest talks about life dreams, the paths we had taken and the ones we wished we had. He was a good listener. He never offered unwanted advice. He never tried to fix things that were not his to fix. "It was like living with a critic who never took a day off," I said finally. "Everything I did was wrong, insufficient, or somehow selfish. I spent so much energy trying to anticipate his complaints that I forgot I was allowed to have opinions of my own." "That sounds exhausting." It was. I didn't realize how exhausting until it stopped. Jake studied me over his coffee cup. "Are you happy? I mean, really happy?" The question surprised me with its directness. "Yes," I said, and I meant it. "For the first time in years, I'm actually happy." "Good," he said. "You deserve that." That evening, I did something I had not done in ages. I called my sister, the one who had stopped visiting because she could not stand watching what I had become. "I was wondering when you'd finally call," she said without preamble. "I heard through the grapevine that you'd grown a spine. News travels fast." "Are you kidding? The whole family has been waiting for you to wake up. We just didn't know how to tell you without making things worse." We talked for 2 hours, and I realized how much I had missed her with her honesty and her complete intolerance for self-pity. By the end of the call, we had made plans for her to visit the following weekend. "Fair warning," she said before hanging up. "I'm bringing wine and terrible movies, and we're going to dissect every bad decision you've made for the past 7 years." I can't wait. The house felt different with him gone. Not empty, spacious. I rearranged furniture. I hung artwork I had been meaning to display. I played music as loud as I wanted. I cooked elaborate meals just because I enjoyed cooking when it was not an obligation. I started a garden in the backyard, something I had always wanted to do, but had never found time for when every moment was dedicated to maintaining his comfort. 3 weeks into his absence, he called. "I think I've had enough space," he announced, as if he had been doing me a favor. "I'll be home tomorrow." "This is your home too," I said neutrally. "You don't need my permission to be here." "Right. Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Reasonable. I almost laughed. He still thought this was about him teaching me a lesson. He still thought his absence had been punishment I should be eager to see end. He had no idea that his leaving had been the best 3 weeks I had had in years. I'll see you tomorrow then, I said, and hung up before he could say anything else. I spent that evening looking around my peaceful, organized, joyful home and preparing myself for the return of chaos. But something had fundamentally changed during his absence. I had remembered who I was without him. And that person was someone I actually liked. Whatever happened next, I was not going back to being the woman who accepted crumbs and called it a feast. He came home looking like a man who had been hit by a truck. Gone was the cocky confidence he had worn when he left. Instead, he dragged himself through the front door like someone carrying invisible weights. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner for one when he appeared in the doorway. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he had the general appearance of someone who had not been sleeping well. "We need to talk," he said without preamble. "About what?" I continued chopping vegetables without bothering to look up. "About us. About this whole mess." He slumped into a chair at the kitchen table, the same spot where he had presented his infamous spreadsheet months earlier. "I've been doing a lot of thinking." "That's nice." "She left me," he said quietly. "Said she didn't want to be with someone who treated his wife the way I treated you." I paused my chopping for just a moment. Then I resumed. "How unfortunate for you. That's it. That's all you have to say." I set down my knife and finally looked at him. What I saw was a broken man, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, no anger, just a vast, echoing emptiness where my feelings for him used to live. What would you like me to say? That I'm sorry she finally saw who you really are? That I'm pleased you got a taste of your own medicine? I shrugged. I honestly don't care enough about your relationship with her to have an opinion. He flinched like I had slapped him. How can you be so cold? Cold. I considered this. I'm not cold. I'm just done. Done with what? Done with caring about your feelings while you ignore mine. Done with making your problems my responsibility. Done with accepting scraps and calling it love. I turned back to my cooking. I'm done with you. The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of 7 years of accumulated resentment and disappointment. "I want to fix this," he said finally. "I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you. But we can work through this, right? People change. I can change." I laughed. The sound surprised both of us. It was not bitter or angry. It was genuinely amused by the absurdity of the situation. "Do you remember what you said when you wanted me to quit my job?" "What does that have to do with anything?" "You said a real man takes care of his wife. You said you wanted to provide for me and protect me. You made it sound romantic. Noble, even." I moved to the stove, still not looking at him. "Do you remember what you said when I told you I missed working?" He was quiet. "You said I was being selfish, that a good wife supports her husband's dreams instead of chasing her own fantasies. You made me feel guilty for wanting something beyond your kitchen. I was wrong about that. Were you, or are you just saying that because your backup plan fell through?" I turned to face him fully. "Because the thing is, I don't think you were wrong back then. I think you meant every word. Just like you meant every word when you called me a freeloader who needed to start paying her fair share. You've learned that actions have consequences. That's not the same as changing who you are fundamentally." I leaned against the counter, studying him like a specimen under a microscope. "You didn't want to fix our marriage when you were getting everything you wanted from it. You want to fix it now because you're getting nothing. That's not true, isn't it? When I was doing all the housework and asking for nothing in return, was our marriage broken then?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. "When I was managing your entire life while you sent money to another woman, was that something that needed fixing? You don't understand the situation with her." "Oh, I understand perfectly. She was your escape valve. When you were frustrated with me for being human instead of a perfect domestic appliance, you had somewhere else to put your attention, someone who made you feel like a hero instead of holding you accountable. I walked to the table and sat across from him close enough to see panic creeping into his eyes. Here's what I think happened, I continued calmly. You got comfortable having two women competing for your attention. It made you feel powerful, important. But then I stopped competing, and she got tired of being with someone who treats women like disposable conveniences. Now you're alone, and suddenly our marriage is worth fighting for.
I love you, he said desperately. I know I didn't show it, but I do love you.
Maybe you do, in whatever way you're capable of loving someone. But here's the thing. I held his gaze. I don't love you anymore. The words hung in the air between us, simple and final. I don't love the man who convinced me I was worthless while I made his life perfect. I don't love the man who called me a gold digger for wanting basic respect. And I definitely don't love the man who was only here because his plan B didn't work out. He stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language.
But I can change, he said again, his voice cracking. I can be the man you need me to be.
That's the problem, I said gently. I don't need you to be anything. I don't need you at all. I started packing the next morning while he was at work, methodically going through 7 years of accumulated life and taking only what was truly mine. It was surprising how little that turned out to be. My clothes, my books, my laptop, a few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to my grandmother. Everything else was either his or something we had bought together back when together still meant something. I was folding my last sweater when I heard his car in the driveway. He was not supposed to be home for hours, but apparently word travels fast when someone calls out of work to prevent his spouse from leaving. What the hell is this? He stood in the bedroom doorway staring at the suitcases lined up on the bed. I'm moving out. I continued packing calmly. I found a furnished apartment downtown close to work. You can't just leave. Actually, I can. I'm an adult with a job and my own income. Leaving is well within my capabilities. He rushed to the suitcase I was packing and started pulling clothes back out. Stop this. We need to talk about this rationally. I gently but firmly took my blouse back from his hands. There's nothing to discuss. I told you last night I'm done. But you can't mean that. People don't just throw away 7 years of marriage. I'm not throwing it away. You already did that when you decided I was worth less than your ex-girlfriend. I zipped the suitcase closed. I'm just finally accepting what you taught me. He sat heavily on the bed, looking around the room like he was seeing it for the first time. Where will you go? What will you do? I told you, I have an apartment. As for what I'll do, I'll work, pay my bills, and live my life. You know all the things I've been doing for the past few months. But what about us? What about this house? What about our life together? I paused in my packing and really looked at him. He seemed genuinely confused, as if he could not understand why actions might have permanent consequences. Our life together was me serving you while you convinced me I should be grateful for the privilege. That's not a life I want anymore. I said I'd change, and I believe you think you would try. But change requires understanding what was wrong in the first place, and you still don't get it. I picked up the last suitcase. You think this is about the money you gave her, or the chores you didn't do, or the bills you wanted me to split? Those were just symptoms. Symptoms of what? Of the fact that you never saw me as an equal partner. I was either a service provider or a burden, depending on what you needed at the moment. That's not love. That's ownership. I walked toward the door and he scrambled to follow me. Please don't do this. I'm begging you. I'll do anything. I stopped at the front door and turned back to him one last time. Do you know what you could have done 6 months ago that would have saved this marriage? He shook his head desperately. You could have said thank you. Just once. You could have acknowledged that I had been contributing to this relationship all along, even if it wasn't in the form of a paycheck. You could have treated me like a partner instead of like hired help who wasn't working out. I can say thank you now. I can. It's too late. I opened the door. Thank you only matters when it's sincere, not when it's strategic. The moving truck was waiting outside. I had arranged everything while he was at work, efficient as always. As the movers loaded my belongings, he stood on the front porch looking lost. "How am I supposed to live here without you?" he called out. I looked back at him. "The same way I lived here with you," I said. "You'll figure it out." The apartment was small but bright, with big windows and hardwood floors that reflected the afternoon sunlight. It came furnished with simple, clean furniture that was nothing like the heavy, expensive pieces we had accumulated together. I loved it immediately. That first night, I sat on my new couch eating takeout from my favorite Thai place, the one he had always complained was too spicy, and felt something I had not experienced in years. Complete peace. No one was going to come home and criticize the way I had arranged the throw pillows. No one was going to leave dirty dishes in my clean sink. No one was going to make me feel like I needed to justify my existence or apologize for taking up space. I was alone. And it was glorious. My phone rang around 9. His name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. Finally, I turned it off. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of possibility, full of choices that were mine alone to make, full of a future that stretched ahead of me like an open road with no predetermined destination. For the first time in 7 years, I fell asleep without worrying whether I had done enough to earn my place in someone else's life. I was home. The first thing I did in my new apartment was buy flowers, bright yellow sunflowers that I placed on the kitchen table where I could see them every morning. In my old life, flowers were an unnecessary expense, a frivolity that would have required justification and probably resulted in a lecture about fiscal responsibility. Now they were just beautiful, and that was reason enough. I spent the first weekend arranging my new space exactly how I wanted it, books organized by subject instead of alphabetically, because that was how my mind worked. Art hung at heights that made sense for my eyes, not his. The thermostat set to a temperature that kept me comfortable without needing to negotiate. Every small decision felt revolutionary. Work became even more fulfilling without the constant underlying stress of managing someone else's emotions. I found myself taking on bigger challenges and proposing bolder solutions. Jake noticed the change immediately. "You're on fire lately," he said, after a presentation that landed us a major new account. "Whatever you're doing differently, keep doing it." "I'm sleeping better," I said. It was true, but it was not the whole truth. The whole truth was that I had stopped living in a state of chronic anxiety, always braced for the next criticism, the next demand, the next accusation that I was not grateful enough. Jake and I started spending more time together outside of work. Dinner after long days, coffee on Saturday mornings, walks through the downtown farmers market. Nothing officially romantic. Just the easy companionship of two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. He never asked for more than I was offering, never made me feel like his attention came with strings attached. When I mentioned that I was not ready for anything serious, he simply nodded and said, "Fair enough. I like spending time with you regardless." It was the first time in years that a man had accepted my boundaries without arguing, pouting, or trying to convince me I was wrong about my own feelings. "You know what's weird?" I told him one evening as we walked through the park near my apartment. "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to suddenly start keeping score of favors, or making demands, or telling me I'm not grateful enough." "That sounds exhausting," he said quietly. "Living like that." It was. I didn't realize how exhausting until it stopped. 3 months into my new life, my sister came to visit. She walked through my little apartment with obvious approval, taking in the flowers, the books arranged just how I liked them, the general atmosphere of contentment. "You look different," she said over wine and takeout. "Younger somehow." I feel younger, like I got my life back. "Are you dating Jake officially yet?" "We're taking it slow. Really slow." I curled up in my favorite corner of the couch. It's nice not having to rush into anything. He's not going anywhere, and neither am I. "Good for you." After 7 years of walking on eggshells, you deserve someone who lets you set the pace. My phone had stopped ringing weeks ago. The desperate voicemails had tapered off, then stopped entirely. I had heard through mutual friends that he was struggling with basic household tasks, living off frozen dinners and wearing wrinkled clothes. Part of me had expected to feel guilty about this, but I did not. His incompetence was not my emergency anymore. "Do you miss it at all?" my sister asked. "The marriage, I mean. Not him specifically, but the idea of it." I thought about the question seriously. I miss the marriage I thought we had in the beginning, the partnership I thought we were building. But that was mostly in my head anyway. The reality was me doing all the emotional labor while pretending we were a team. And now I'm actually free to build the life I want, instead of constantly adapting to someone else's vision of what my life should look like. That night, after my sister had gone back to her hotel, I sat in my quiet apartment and made a list of everything I had accomplished since leaving. The client accounts I had secured, the friendships I had rekindled, the hobbies I had rediscovered, the simple pleasure of making decisions without having to justify them to anyone. At the bottom of the list I wrote, "Learn that I don't need someone else to complete me." I was never incomplete. Jake texted around 10 asking how the visit with my sister had gone. We exchanged a few messages, easy and comfortable, before saying goodnight. No drama. No hidden meanings. No walking on eggshells trying to avoid saying the wrong thing. Just two people who enjoyed each other's company, building something at their own pace. As I got ready for bed, I caught sight of myself in the bathroom mirror. My sister was right. I did look younger, but more than that, I looked like myself again. The woman who used to have opinions, dreams, and boundaries. The woman who used to know her own worth. She had been there all along, just buried under years of being told she was asking for too much by wanting basic respect. I turned off the lights and settled into my comfortable bed, listening to the sounds of the city outside my window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, and new choices that were entirely mine to make. For the first time in years, I could not wait to see what came next. 6 months later, he appeared in the lobby of my office building, like a ghost from a life I had almost forgotten. I was coming back from lunch when I saw him sitting in one of the reception chairs, cleaned up and wearing a suit that actually fit properly. "Could we talk?" he asked, standing when he saw me. "Please, just 5 minutes." I looked at this man I had once loved, once feared disappointing, once built my entire identity around pleasing, and felt nothing but mild curiosity about what had brought him there. 5 minutes, I agreed. I led him to a small conference room where we could speak privately. He looked nervous in a way I had never seen before. Like someone approaching a job interview for a position he desperately needed, but probably would not get. "You look good," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "Happy?" "I am happy. I've been working on myself," he continued, the words tumbling out like he had rehearsed them. "Therapy, anger management, the whole thing. I've learned a lot about how I treated you, how wrong I was about everything." "That's good. Personal growth is important. I can cook now. Really cook, not just microwave stuff. And I've been keeping the house clean, doing my own laundry. I even learned how to iron." He smiled hopefully. "I know that probably sounds pathetic, but I wanted you to know that I get it now. I understand what you were doing all those years." "Okay." My calm responses seemed to unnerve him. I could see him struggling to find the words that would create the reaction he wanted. "I miss you," he said finally. "I miss us. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I'm asking for one anyway. I can be the partner you needed me to be. I can be better." I studied his face, searching for any trace of the feelings that used to live inside me. The love, the hope, the desperate need for his approval. They were gone, replaced by something much more valuable. Indifference. "I believe you," I said simply. "You do." His face lit with hope. "Yes, I believe you've learned to cook and clean and manage your own life. I believe you've gained some insight into how poorly you treated me. I even believe you're sincere about wanting to change.
Then. But it doesn't matter. The hope died in his eyes as quickly as it had appeared.
6 months ago, hearing you say these things might have meant something to me. A year ago, I would have been grateful just to hear you acknowledge that I had been contributing to our relationship all along. I leaned back in my chair, completely relaxed.
But that woman is gone. What do you mean? I don't need you to validate my worth anymore. I don't need you to appreciate my contributions or treat me like an equal partner.
I already know I'm valuable, with or without your recognition.
He stared at me like I was speaking in code.
The person you want back. The woman who would be grateful for crumbs of respect. The woman who would rebuild her entire life around your improved behavior. She doesn't exist anymore. I outgrew her.
But if I've changed, you probably have at least somewhat.
But here's the thing you still don't understand. This was never really about you changing. It was about me realizing that I didn't need you to.
I stood, signaling that our conversation was over.
I have a life now that makes me genuinely happy, work that challenges me, friends who respect me, choices that are entirely my own. I wake up every morning excited about the day ahead instead of anxious about what I might do wrong.
But we could have that together now. We could be real partners.
We could, I agreed. But I don't want to. Not with you. Not with anyone. I would have to train to see my humanity. I would rather be alone and happy than partnered and constantly proving my worth. He looked devastated, like someone who had just realized he had lost something irreplaceable.
Is there anything I can say? Anything I can do?
You can be happy for me, I said gently. You can understand that this isn't about punishment or revenge. It's about me choosing a life where I don't have to fight for basic respect.
I walked him to the elevator.
As the doors opened, he turned back one last time.
I really do love you, he said. I know you do, in whatever way you're capable of loving someone.
But I love myself more now, and that makes all the difference. The elevator doors closed, and I watched the numbers light up as he descended back to whatever life he was building without me. Then I returned to my office, where Jake was waiting with coffee and the presentation materials for our 3 o'clock meeting. "Everything okay?" he asked, noticing my thoughtful expression.
Everything is perfect, I said, and I meant it completely.
That evening, I sat in my favorite corner of my apartment with a cup of tea and my journal, documenting the final chapter of a story that had taken me 7 years to finish writing. Outside my window, the city hummed with life and possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake.
Dinner tomorrow.
"There's a new place I think you'd love." I smiled and typed back, "I'd like that." Not because I needed him, not because I was afraid of being alone, but because I genuinely enjoyed his company and chose to share my time with him. The difference was everything. I closed my journal and looked around my small, perfectly arranged apartment. Every item in it was there because I wanted it there. Every choice, from the sunflowers on my table to the book on my nightstand, reflected my preferences and no one else's. 7 years earlier, I had believed that love meant making yourself smaller so someone else could feel bigger. I had thought partnership meant erasing your own needs to better serve someone else's. Now I understood that real love for yourself and for others required the exact opposite. It demanded that you show up as your full, authentic self and refuse to accept anything less than the same in return. I had learned that I did not need someone else to complete me because I had never been incomplete. I had learned that being alone was infinitely better than being with someone who made me feel lonely. Most importantly, I had learned that my worth was not up for negotiation. As I got ready for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror one more time. The woman looking back at me was confident, content, and completely free. She knew exactly who she was. She knew exactly what she deserved, and she was never settling for less